Welcome back to Open Line. Our topic, once again, is social media and the impact it has on younger generations, but really, you can expand that to all generations because, quite frankly, we were talking about in the break, all of us at this point, for the most part, have social media. And if you don't, you at least hear about it or you know somebody that it impacts you. Once again, our guest is Dr. Katie Spierko from Lipscomb University. Katie, you really focus, I'm sure, with your concentration of what you study on mental health. And so let's talk about the impact that social media, good, bad, indifferent, somewhere in between, social media can have on mental health.
So there's a lot of research that's looking at both the benefits and detriments of social media exposure to mental health on adolescents and on really everyone. We certainly have evidence that more longer exposure, kids and teenagers that are having more than about 3 hours a day of screen time are at higher risk for both depression and anxiety. Now, there are also certainly benefits. Kids that otherwise would maybe have problem finding social groups with similar interests, social supports. There are certainly more avenues and opportunities to find peers and find positive social interactions thanks to social media. When looking at the negatives, because I think that's what really people tend to focus more on, the depression, anxiety, a big piece of that we know is social comparison. The more adolescents are acknowledging that they're comparing themselves to their friends, comparing their appearance to their friends, going through pictures and evaluating themselves against others, the more it's going to have a negative effect on both their depression and their anxiety. Looking at it a little bit more broadly, I think it's easy to scapegoat social media as being the problem. We have a lot of association studies or correlation studies. I teach my stats students, correlation does not equal causation. Because two things are related does not mean that one is causing the other. And so while there's, I would imagine, a causal component, there's also just some association. So we want to really take a step back and look at what we have, I think, a lot more research standing to support, which is just protective factors against depression and anxiety for adolescents. We know that academic achievement, doing well in school, having a high self-esteem, having positive social connection, having engagement in 2 or more activities in terms of athletics, clubs, social groups at school, developing coping skills, problem-solving skills, the ability to self-regulate emotionally. These are the protective factors that are going to keep our kids from getting depressed and anxious. Physical activity and exercise is a huge one as well. Being outside, sunlight exposure, there's a wealth of evidence throughout the lifespan that that's going to affect our mood through vitamin D absorption and other mediums. And so it's not just the social media, but it's what are kids not doing when they're spending hours and hours a day on social media. And so going home and telling your kids, all right, that's it, no more TikTok today or only 20 minutes. If you stop there, you're really not solving a problem. It's really looking more at making sure that your kids are getting access to these protective factors, that you're having conversations with your kids, you're connecting with them, you're making sure that they're connecting with other people. And I think the focus really is just on ensuring that the social media is not interfering significantly with their ability to engage in what we know are good protective factors against mental health.
Absolutely. You mentioned social comparison. I feel like that's one that's brought up a lot, and probably because it's one of the big concerns. Is it just sitting down with the child in your life and reminding them that Instagram does not equal reality, that people are usually posting the really good things and they're not seeing, the granular of life? Or what is it, what's that conversation starter for people that have kids in their life?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question, because I think we all really know that. We've all heard that at this point, and we still do it. We still go on and we scroll. It's really more about, I think, self-reflecting and being mindful and aware of your internal experience as you're doing something. So when you're going through social media, teaching your kids to be more aware of how they're feeling when they're looking at the posts. And even, social media they have good applications that are really helpful if you employ them. Like, pay attention. Are there certain friends where their posts make you feel jealous or they make you feel bad about yourself? you don't have to unfollow them, you don't have to block them, but you can hide that content from your feed. It doesn't mean that you don't like the person or that in real life you're not friends with them. They don't have to know, but paying attention to when I see this, this person's post, I feel good about myself, or I'm invited to things. Whereas when I see this person's, I'm starting to feel bad about myself. Paying attention to that, noticing it, acknowledging it, and coming up with a plan so that you're not just inundating yourself with things that are making you feel bad is a really good place to start.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, if you have any questions yourself, feel free to call with the number on your screen. We're happy to, and comments are welcome too. A big topic that also comes up anytime you bring up the word social media is cyberbullying. And that can be obviously on the negative side of things too. How do you approach that topic also with your kids? And as a parent or grandparent or somebody invested with a child's life, how do you know that it's even happening?
You often don't. I mean, you should be monitoring it, and often our teenagers are at a technological advantage. We monitor as best as we can, but we're not always going to be able to see everything or catch everything despite our best intentions. So beyond just taking every effort to be aware, really the most important piece by far is knowing how to relate to your kids. Talking to your kids in a way that is non-judgmental, that is encouraging them to be open and encouraging a trusting relationship is going to get you so much further than any other tip or trick or app or cyber spying device that exists. I think with kids, one thing to look out for is if a kid's being defensive. We often think of defensiveness as a person trait. It's not a person trait, it's an interaction trait. People don't become defensive unless they're perceiving an attack and they're defending themselves against something. So when you notice your kids start engaging in defensive language, kind of just taking a step back and thinking, what is it that they're feeling attacked about? And trying a different approach. For example, asking them about TikTok, asking them about, or just saying, I heard this study that kids on average are spending 9 hours a day on social media. Does that seem surprising to you? What do you think based on your friends? Is that accurate or not? That's going to be a way different conversation than you're spending too much time on social media and it's going to stop now. And so kind of pulling information from them in a way that reflects curiosity and interest in their lives. Showing some positive interest in what they're doing on social media is going to get you sometimes further than any other kind of when you're interrogating them about things. So if they're posting something, you don't want them to feel like you're monitoring them just purely to restrict or purely to punish them or to take things away. The more you can come about it from a point of interest, using humor, using it as a way to engage with your kids, you can incorporate social media into your interactions with your kids in a way that can be helpful, in a way that they might open up a little bit more and be less secretive when there is a concern. Because most kids, I mean, they don't want to be bullied, but they're often embarrassed or they're not sure how to go about asking, or pride gets in the way. I think we can all understand that. And so the more you can establish that trusting, open relationship with your kids, the better position you're going to be when something like that comes up.
Absolutely. And then I think the next logical step to take the conversation, staying on the topic of cyberbullying, is once you find out that it's a problem, whether that's from your child or, from your own devices, whatever those may be, what's the best way to approach that topic? I mean, obviously bullying is not a new thing, but for a lot of parents and grandparents that may be watching us tonight, cyberbullying may be a new thing. So should be considered differently than, the age-old topic of bullying? Or what's the best way to handle that?
The biggest difference with cyberbullying from the traditional style that we all kind of grew up with is that there's really no escape from it. When you're bullied at school, there used to be the safe haven where you come home and get at least a break from it. When it's going on in social media, it's just constant, and there's an added level of visibility. Kids are already egocentric, and they're seeing things from their perspective, and they're kind of feeling like there's a spotlight on them. And then when they're really is in terms of you're watching how many likes or comments something is getting, it can certainly be extremely anxiety provoking. And so being aware of that aspect of it, and that's where the monitoring and the setting limits come in, and being engaged as a parent, it's going to look different based on the age of your kid, the community you have at your school. But as much as you can, know your kids as parents. Being able to relate, be able to call and intervene is a lot easier when you know the community. So making some proactive efforts to just know who your kids are around is going to be helpful in that regard.
Absolutely. You made a great point at the very beginning that I wanted to make sure we circled back to. I wrote it down on my notes because you talked about, it's not necessarily, nor probably can it be, the place of the government to fully be able to regulate these social media companies. It's on all of us. I'd like to explore that topic a little bit more. What should everyday people be doing to make sure that these are safer environments for everybody that uses these social media accounts?
I think a lot of it is just being realistic about what it is and the role that it has in your life. I think it's a similar conversation that you should have with your teenagers about credit cards. Credit cards aren't bad, but if you think the credit card companies are your friend and they're there to protect you and they got everything regulated so you just spend as much as you're able, you're going to end up in trouble. So you've got to understand that the credit card companies are there to make money from you. Social media platforms are there to make money from you. They're there to make money from you by selling products and getting information about you in order to target ads to sell more effectively. And so if we have that mindset, we're going to have our guard up a little bit more. And it's important for kids to have their guard up and understand that just because an influencer is saying something, that doesn't mean that they're just looking out for them or they're really their friend. And I do think that Facebook and some of these platforms have gotten so big, we feel like it's almost a right. Like everyone has to have social media. We need it. And we confuse it with, roads or water where the government's providing it for us for our good. It's a private, it's a company that you can choose to use it or not, but you're not paying for it. You're not paying a subscription because their money's coming from advertisement. So we need to have a realistic impression of what it is and be able to convey that to our kids so they can use it responsibly.
Absolutely. I absolutely love, by the way, the comparison of the credit card companies. That's a great way to put it. We will have much more of our conversation with Dr. Spierko right after this break.